Hello, David here at merchantaccounts.ca. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about Visa's new claims resolution process. It's going to replace that old chargeback process that's been in place for many years with a new streamlined process that should make it faster for disputes to be resolved, which is a benefit for cardholders and merchants. But really importantly, it's supposed to cut down on the number of chargebacks that actually occur. So we'll get into that and I'll explain, but we'll start by telling you this. There is no more such a thing as a chargeback. Going forward, and as of April 15th, Visa will refer to these as disputes, which makes more sense. And in the past, when you put all your paperwork together and sent it off to fight the chargeback, it was called the representment, and it's no longer called that. Now it's called the dispute response. Again, more sensible, life is getting easier. In terms of the actual process itself, what's changing is that in the past, chargebacks would occur. This was a common complaint. I'd hear it from merchants at lots of different banks and processors that they would get a chargeback, for example, for an order they had refunded a week ago. It's like, how can I be getting a chargeback and now I'm getting a chargeback fee? It's very unfair. And it was unfair. And what was happening is the issuers were not always ensuring that the chargeback was fair. In other words, if a credit had been issued, the chargeback is not supposed to go through. Visa has addressed this, and this new process is going to prevent that from happening. What's happening behind the scenes when a chargeback occurs, it will now go into Visa's new platform. That platform is going to check automatically. You don't have to do anything to see if there was a credit, if there's any criteria, for example, that would cause the chargeback to be illegitimate. And if so, that chargeback is blocked. You'll never even know it happened. And so the number of chargebacks that merchants see is going to decrease. This is a good thing for merchants. One of the things that may be a challenge for merchants is the timeframes that you have to respond are getting shorter. The time frame when a chargeback comes through, your processor, depending on their own process, has to receive their notification and issue it to the merchant. So it's not possible to say exactly how much time with your particular processor you will have under the new rules, but you got to move more quickly. And in 2019, Visa is going to shorten the window again. They want a faster, more streamlined dispute response process. So that's something to be aware of. Now, when you're going to fight that chargeback, in the past, I talked about representment a minute ago, where you would take your paperwork, you'd send it to your processor, and then they'd send it off to the card issuer and defend the chargeback on your behalf. A lot of merchants didn't really understand what was happening behind the scenes. Before these new changes have gone into place, there was a series of communication that could occur. Your processor would provide the information to the issuing bank would evaluate it. There could be another round of communication where questions came back and a clarification could be provided. So you could have 2 rounds of communication between the processor and the issuing bank. That's not the case anymore. This is an important point. You've got one shot, literally one shot, to get it right. If you're going to win the chargeback, you have to put together a compelling case and get that information right the first time. And that's actually Visa's own words, compelling. You need to provide compelling evidence to try to overturn a chargeback or dispute that's come in. I'll include a link to the page on Visa where they talk about this. It's going to be a little bit beyond the scope of this article to talk too much about the different items that you can provide to create a compelling package, but at a high level, you want to prove that they got what they ordered and it was really them. So if you have a proof of delivery, that's fantastic. If you have, but a proof of delivery on its own is not enough. You have to prove. I'll give you a great example. If you have a website and people are accessing it. Let's use Netflix. I love using Netflix as an example. If you have a Netflix subscription and you try to charge it back, Netflix could prove a couple things. They could prove, hey, you've been using this service for 6 months. 2, here's your IP address where you've accessed it for 6 months and you kept on using it all month. 3, maybe their system's even sophisticated enough to have like a fingerprint, like a device ID for if you're streaming it on an Xbox, maybe that's visible in the information on their server. Point being, the better information you have, send it off. I will include a link to another video that we have and more content we have about how to fight chargebacks and try and win. Something else that merchants don't know is about the arbitration process. So one of the reasons that chargebacks are a challenge for merchants is you send the information to the processor. The processor gives the information to the issuing bank because the issuing bank is in contact with the customer that's disputing the matter. Well, at that point, the issuing bank is the one. They look at this information and they figure, is this a reasonable chargeback? The problem is that the issuing bank's customer is the credit card holder. And the issuing bank really isn't as concerned, all things being equal, about the well-being of the merchant. So in a card-not-present transaction, like an e-commerce transaction, it's often a very strong uphill battle to win that chargeback. And there are cases where you have a really good case in maybe an unfair situation, but the issuer comes back with a no, this is a fair chargeback, it's going through. And sometimes the processor will deliver that news to the merchant, and the merchant gets really mad at their credit card processor. Like, this is ridiculous. You know, it's understandable, but what they don't understand is it wasn't the credit card processor's decision. The processor represented you, and then the issuing bank made a decision. And that's where it doesn't stop, but where most merchants, or many merchants, think that it does. You have the option to take an issue to Visa for arbitration. Arbitration is where Visa acts as an independent third party and looks at both sides and then makes a decision. So the drawback with arbitration is it's expensive. I believe the cost prior to the change was $250 to send an issue for arbitration. Now it's going to be $500 to take something to arbitration going forward. So if you're a merchant that has you sell a $100 pair of shoes and there's a chargeback, it doesn't make sense really, unless you're extremely confident of your case, to try and fight that at Visa by arbitration. Are you going to gamble $500 to win back $100? That's why most merchants don't go to arbitration unless they sell really high ticket items. So maybe if you sell travel packages and you can prove the people got on the plane, you can prove they went to the resort, and you can prove they enjoyed some lovely dinners and a couple rounds of margaritas, like, take that in for arbitration because you have a super strong case and it's probably lots of money, $3,000 maybe for that trip. But if you're selling an inexpensive item, it's not worth taking it to arbitration in most cases. Continuing with the topic of simplification and making life easier, Visa is also addressing the way chargebacks are handled technically within the system. In the past, there were a lot of different chargeback reason codes, and it could get confusing. Sometimes merchants would get chargebacks, they wouldn't even really understand what it was for. Going forward, there's only 4 categories. The first category is fraud. Fraud's an easy example. That's where if someone stole someone's credit card and used it without authorization. So that's one of the 4 categories, chargeback categories. The second category is authorization errors. For example, if someone goes to use their credit card and the system comes back with a decline, but it actually ends up going through. This is something that happens rarely, but for example, if you submitted a payment and there was a timeout between somewhere between the card issuer and where it got processed, that can sometimes cause an authorization error. That is the second category. The third category is processing errors. This is where errors could take place where the transaction occurred, it was a legitimate transaction, but there was a mistake. For example, the merchant billed the customer in the wrong currency. So that would fall under the third category, processing errors. The fourth category is consumer disputes. This is where it's a legitimate order. Someone's purchased something, but something's wrong. They might buy something and it never comes. Or, silly example, I buy a pair of shoes, but I open the box, there's 2 left foot shoes in it, and I have a right foot and I can't squeeze my foot into it. That's an example of a consumer dispute, the last category. There are some other changes in regards to simplification. Another one is merchants can now bundle their dispute responses. In the past, let's say that you had a recurring billing website and you had a customer with a whole bunch of transactions. Say they charge back 6 months of recurring billing transactions. You'd have to fill out all these reports and handle them separately. Not anymore. Now it can be bundled in one compelling statement, and that just reduces the amount of paperwork that you have to fill out, which is really nice. One of the last things that's changing won't directly impact merchants, but I wonder if it will have a trickle-down effect. Visa's getting a little stricter with card issuers. One of the things that's changing is if I report my credit card stolen, or if I make a fraudulent claim on my credit card, if the issuer doesn't close that account and lets any subsequent transactions happen after the date when I've reported some fraud, the issuer can't claim a dispute, can't do a chargeback for any transactions after that date. And what I wonder is if, as a result, issuers will be clamping down a little bit more and maybe merchants might see fractionally more declined transactions because of this. Maybe not. It's just a thought that I wonder if will happen. So in summary, chargebacks are a thing of the past, but not completely. They're really just renamed to disputes. And when you fight it, it's a dispute response. You have less time to do so. You've got one shot to get it right, but the number of disputes and your Lisa chargebacks that come through will be reduced. So this is a good thing for merchants for a certainty, especially if you're a merchant with just a higher risk product or service. Merchants use pre-authorizations because if you pre-authorize a credit card, you can't get a chargeback until you capture it. So that's Visa's recommended practice. That's what most high-risk merchants do. But even still, sometimes they slip through and you find out after the fact, you get some bit of information. And this way, as long as you beat the issuer to the punch and you get that refund in there, you're not going to get chargeback fees. You're not going to see a chargeback come through. A dispute. See, I have old habits here. But anyways, it's a good thing. If you have any questions about it, reach out to us at merchantaccounts.ca. Have a great day.